Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad you're here. So we are entering what is commonly referred to as the 3 weeks of consolation leading up to Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av commemorates the destruction of the temple. And as I understand it, it's the date that we kind of set aside for acknowledging a lot of losses, and it's a day of mourning. So the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 of the Common Era, and then we had a lot of surus since then. And Tisha B'Av has become the repository. So, knowing that we were entering this time, and then shortly after Tisha B'Av, we enter into Elul, where we begin to prepare for the high holidays. I've decided to see about doing some themes. So there's a Buddhist teaching that I think is really appropriate for leading up to Tisha B'Av, and it's the Four Noble Truths. And very, very briefly, the Four Noble Truths are, number one, that there is pain or suffering in life. And the Pali word is dukkha, and we're going to come back to really pulling apart what dukkha means. The second noble truth is that suffering exists because of our attachment to cravings and aversions and a false sense of security. And the third noble truth is that we can end suffering and achieve a state of peace or equanimity. So another way to look at these first three noble truths is everything has pain. Suffering is how we look at the pain, is what causes suffering. And therefore, suffering is optional. We can learn to not do that. And the fourth noble truth is how we can live without suffering. So, with that as a little introduction, I want to say that today we're going to focus on the first noble truth, and in subsequent weeks, we'll look at the other noble truths. And hopefully this is going to make some sense and resonate, and if it doesn't, then toss it out, and that's okay. I find it really useful. So I'm going to suggest that we take a breath and really settle. Notice your contact with the floor, with your chair, with your cushion. And just allow yourself to really be grounded. So in order to understand this first noble truth, we really need to understand what dukkha means. Because as with Hebrew and Yiddish, there's not an easy translation with a lot of Pali words. And dukkha is a great example of a word that's not easy to translate. So we're really going to spend time unpacking this. Du gets translated as bad or difficult. So that's easy. Ka, however, gets translated as empty. So empty can be really specific, like not having something, you're empty of that. But empty can be more general and philosophical, meaning devoid of permanence. So with that slant on dukkha, it could be better translated as unsatisfying or unreliable, rather than pain or suffering, which is absolutely the common, suffering is the common translation. So with this fuller understanding of dukkha, we can say that everything has a measure of dukkha. It could be physical pain of some sort, a headache, a broken bone, an illness. It could be emotional pain, like stress or anxiety or anger. It could also be a little tinge that arises when we're experiencing something really pleasurable because we know it's fleeting. So I'm going to share some short quotes from a sampling of Buddhist teachers, some of whom are also Jewish, to help us really really get dukkha. And then we're going to use suffering as our translation. So this is from Sharon Salzberg. There are times in our lives when we wish we could change the ending of the story. Sometimes we lose what we care about. We are separated from those we love. Our bodies fail us as we get older. We feel helpless or hurt, or our lives just seem to be slipping away. These are all aspects of dukkha, one of the principal teachings of the Buddha. Dukkha means suffering, discontent, unsatisfactoriness, hollowness, change. Suffering in his teaching does not necessarily mean grave physical pain, but rather the mental suffering we undergo when our tendency to hold on to pleasure encounters the fleeting nature of life, and our experiences become unsatisfying and ungovernable. And Norman Fisher wrote, dukkha refers to the psychological experience, sometimes conscious, sometimes not conscious, of the profound fact that everything is impermanent, ungraspable, and not really knowable. And Glenn Wallace wrote, in getting a better feel for the meaning of dukkha, let's place suffering at one extreme of the spectrum. At the other extreme, let's place qualities such as annoyance, tension, non-dependability. Dukkha then can be understood, I apologize. Dukkha then can be understood on one end of the spectrum as a subtle, perhaps barely discernible quality of being, and on the other as severe mental or physical anguish. And from Pema Chodron, whenever there is pain of any kind, the pain of aggression, grieving, loss, irritation, resentment, jealousy, indigestion, physical pain, if you really look into that, you can find out for yourself that behind the pain, there is always something we are attached to. There is always something we are holding on to. So my suggestion for today is that we really sit letting this seep in. So very consciously decide on your anchor for today's meditation. It might be your breath, physical sensations. And as we sit in silence, notice what comes up for you. And when your mind wanders, as it naturally will, with kindness, return to your anchor. And allow yourself the luxury of the curiosity of what's behind the pain. Whenever there is pain of any kind, if you really look into that, you can find out that behind the pain, there is always something we are attached to. There is always something we are holding on to. As we continue sitting, I invite you to have a little smile on your face. That little smile might help you greet whatever is coming up with kindness. As we are gently coming back to the room, And share this poem from Václav Havel. It is I who must begin. Once I begin, once I try, here and now, right where I am, not excusing myself by saying things would be easier elsewhere, without grand speeches and ostentatious gestures, but all the more persistently to live in harmony with the voice of being as I understand it within myself. As soon as I begin that, I suddenly discover, to my surprise, that I am neither the only one nor the first, nor the most important one to have set out upon that road. Whether all is really lost or not depends entirely on whether or not I am lost. So the recording is now off.